This week on The Startup Life.
I think that one of the biggest challenges that I've noticed, aside from getting investment or capital, is customers. So those are kind of the two big, these are even like kind of large initiatives that we have at Epicenter, is to help companies with capital, but also with customers.
All right, Startup Nation, let's take flight as we bring back Louisa Shepherd, Director of Collective Impact at Epicenter. The Startup Life begins now.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Hey, Startup Nation, do you enjoy the startup life? Now you can let the world know with gear from the show. Choose from the Label Yourself, Make Your Own Luck, and Making Money t-shirts to tell your story of your path of entrepreneurship. Click the link in the show notes to purchase. All right, Startup Nation, so I hope you're ready to receive some value today. So today we're here with a very special guest, my friend, Louisa Shepherd. How you doing, Ms. Shepherd?
I'm doing well today.
Awesome. Are you ready to pour some knowledge again into Startup Nation?
Well, I'm going to do what I can. I want to help out the people.
Awesome. So, first of all, tell us, you've been on the Startup Life before. So welcome back. Tell us what's been going on since the last time we talked to you.
Yeah, well, a lot of things have been going on in my life. Memphis, I've been making it home for me, so I bought a house. So I'll be here for a minute.
Okay.
And I recently, at the beginning of the year in January, began working at Epicenter, where we are right now, recording this podcast.
Absolutely.
And so Epicenter is a hub for entrepreneurship and innovation in the city of Memphis. It's a very exciting place to be at this time, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm their Director of Collective Impact.
Okay. And so what does the Director of Impact do? Like, what does that job entail? It's
a whole lot of different things.
Okay.
Which is why when I'm like, I'm the Director of Collective Impact, people are like, I don't know what that is. And I'm like, let me tell you. But essentially what my role entails is gathering and collecting good data about the economic landscape and the entrepreneurial ecosystem specifically in Memphis, and being able to extrapolate insights from that data and articulate it in a way that is compelling and then it makes sense, and that helps to show that Memphis is rising, because everybody who lives here and people who visit here can tell, like, oh, something really interesting is going on here. Like, there seems to be some rejuvenation and some renaissance of sorts going on, but maybe not aren't able to put their finger on it as to like what the catalyst for that is, or what are the causes, or who's benefiting most from that. And so my role is really deeply entrenched in collecting data about all of that.
Now, Louisa, you just recently got an award lately. You're 40 under 40, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
That was recently announced.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
How did you feel about that when you got that award?
I was like, oh, another one of these. I'm just kidding.
Just throw another one on the mantle. Huh? All right.
I'm just kidding. Well, this has been a really good year for me, actually. So in January, I was awarded into the class, I guess, got into the class of the 20 under 30 with the Memphis Flyer, and then this was the 40 under 40 Urban Elite. So I was just like, man, I must be doing something right. I don't quite know what it is. I'll have to think about that for a while.
Gotcha.
But I was very excited. I went to the 40 under 40 gala that Cynthia Daniels and company puts on. I went there last year, and I thought, man, like, this is really cool. Like, I hope maybe one day I can do that. And here we are.
There you go.
I'm really excited about it.
Awesome. And so, speaking of Cynthia Daniel, she actually has a new podcast, The Grind Set, powered by Epicenter.
She does.
Right. Just want to make sure we throw that in there.
I know we got to make a plug.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you're here at Epicenter, and they have like a multitude of programs that help entrepreneurs. Tell us a little bit about those programs.
Yeah, so Epicenter we're a very interesting organization. We like to think of ourselves as a hub organization.
Right.
And so while we do some programming independently, like through Epicenter, the really big, like where the magic happens is how we work with partners in the ecosystem. For sure. To put out programming, and we're able to amplify the efforts that way. So one of the programs that might be really of interest to the people that are listening to this podcast is a program called Co-Starters. Okay. And so Epicenter piloted Co-Starters. The Co-Starters program, it's a 9-week program geared toward people who are more toward the beginning of their entrepreneurial journey. Perhaps they just have an idea, or perhaps they have maybe a side hustle that is generating some revenue, but they're trying to get it all packaged nicely and maybe get a business license and start doing that thing for real. For sure. So that's Co-Starters. We did that program in-house for about a year and a half, 2 years, and are now spinning it out to Memphis Startup. So that's Ronnie Brewer and Lakeisha. I don't know if you know them. Yeah. And so they're going to be taking over the Co-Starters program and really growing it. Okay. And so that'll officially happen in 2019, I believe. Okay. But right now they're working it and they're facilitating it, and for sure. There's a Co-Starters that's actually happening right now at Epicenter for the next couple of weeks. And if you guys, I guess, hit up our website, it's epicentermemphis.org. You'll be able to see if there are more Co-Starters coming up. So that's a really great program. We also have for companies that are like tech companies, maybe they've been able to create a minimum viable product and they're kind of working on what the next steps are. One of our partners, Start Co, does the Summer of Acceleration every year and accelerates many different tech companies in some specific verticals. That particular program is very, very, it's interesting because there are a lot of women entrepreneurs or a lot of people of color that participate. Right. And I find that really cool that obviously there's intention behind like the way that we market and, the way we talk about things. For sure. But like in Memphis specifically, we don't have to do a ton of work to attract those type of entrepreneurs just because there's such a wealth of those people here. So, I think that's a really cool thing as a person of color myself to see that you don't see in other cities. So we've got things like Summer of Acceleration. We've got some interesting like access to capital initiatives coming up. One of them that was just announced is the Small Business Opportunity Loan Fund in partnership with Pathway Lending and a couple of other really large financial institutions in Memphis. And so the Pathway Lending office it's right out of our building at Epicenter. Gotcha. And so entrepreneurs who are coming here, who are co-working here, we have a co-working space, that's another program that we have, are able to have access to financial professionals, are able to have access to the people of Epicenter, and really awesome and amazing our programs team. They're very very well versed and have a deep knowledge of what resources that entrepreneurs might need to be pushed to. So it's just a really great place overall, and that's just a tiny, tiny little fraction of the things that we do and our partners do, but some cool highlights. Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So what is it like working with Leslie? Leslie is a really dope person. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've not ever in my career really felt like I could deeply respect the vision and knowledge and just way that my leadership goes about doing things. Sometimes you have questions, you're like, what they doing over but right. But Leslie, she's a practitioner in this what we call entrepreneurial ecosystem building.
Right.
She is a fantastic leader. She really knows her stuff, and what I really like about her is that she empowers the people that she brings on the team to be great. So
sure.
I've never felt like I can just like walk up into my spot and just be great and like do what I do and be able to like make my recommendations without fearing that somebody will think I don't, that I have some sort of ulterior motive or anything like that. She just is a really fantastic leader.
Awesome. So when we talk about organizations like Epicenter, like StartCo, why are they so important to the growing entrepreneurial community, like the one we're experiencing here in Memphis? Why are they so important?
I think that places like this are important because, we talked about before we started recording this podcast, we talked a lot about things like access to capital. Mm-hmm. All entrepreneurs, even if they have millions of dollars, are always wanting more access to capital. So that's a really big part of what we do is helping entrepreneurs be in front of opportunities to get that. I think another reason why Epicenter and places like Epicenter are very important is to help to create a culture of supporting entrepreneurs in the city, not just, from the individuals who are interested in this life or this world, but from a standpoint of collaborating with corporate big companies to bolster innovation. From a philanthropic standpoint, helping to change the perspective of philanthropy to just, helping, giving to churches or schools and education, which all of those things are really great, but philanthropic giving into the business community or into the entrepreneurial ecosystem has incredible returns that can be felt throughout the city. And then also for reasons like, what I do at Epicenter, which is collecting data to help make the things that we all do as an ecosystem to raise Memphis up, to make sure that we're doing things that make sense, that are supported by data. There are not a lot of places that do that, and so I think that it's very important that we have places like Epicenter who are very intentional about collecting data to help us all be better.
Now, you talked about this a little bit, but I want you to dive into it just a little bit more. Memphis is becoming a hotbed for women, and minority-owned businesses, right? Why is that so important, and how can we continue this trend to move in the right direction?
I think that it's most important because business thrives when it is diverse, right? Like our whole ecosystem, our whole business ecosystem, and our entrepreneurial landscape will be lifted up when everyone is lifted up. Products and services and things that we use, they're made better when there are diverse teams of people who are making them. So, like if I'm a woman and I need, specific products because I'm a woman, but like there are no women who are making them, then there's going to be a disconnect, right?
Right, absolutely.
And for people of color, there are so many amazing ideas and so many amazing products and services and things that our community are working on, but if they're not capitalized the same way as another company is, then they're not lifted up, and they could have a better idea. They could have just as great or a better idea, and the issue is not that their idea is not great. A lot of times the issue is that they don't have the same opportunities, or that they don't have the same access to capital.
Absolutely.
Or they don't have the same resources. So I think that that's really an important reason why having a diverse mix of entrepreneurs is important. There are so many other reasons why, but that's kind of like the first thing that comes to my mind.
Gotcha.
And how we get more of that, I think, is that we as institutions like Epicenter are really intentional about removing some barriers that women or minority-owned businesses might face. So that's the reason why we have that Small Business Opportunity Loan Fund.
Right.
That's the reason why there's a program that one of our partners, the University of Memphis, does every summer called Imagine You for like college aged and grad school aged students, entrepreneurs. And that particular program is a really great example of this concept that we're talking about, right? So they had 23 students that participated in that program this summer, and they worked on ideation and pitching their ideas. And most of the time when you look at a program like that, it's over the summer. People have to pay to participate in it because it's a really like high touch program. And so they're paying a couple $1,000s to even be accepted into it. And you'll see that the demographic of that population is going to be students who don't have to have a job to, pay for where they're going to live and stuff like that. But I think Imagine You is really special because not only did they remove the barrier of having to pay to participate in a summer program, and there are 7 different universities that send their students to that program, but not only did they remove the barrier of having to pay for a type of program like that, but they paid the students to participate in the program. So all the students got a stipend to go and ideate all day, and to work on their idea. And because of that, 20 of the 23 students that participated fell into some sort of diversity category, like they were a woman or they were a person of color, or they're an international student. So, that's like a giant percentage of the participants just because they were really intentional about removing a barrier. Then when we remove those barriers, a lot of times we're able to see much more diverse pool of people participating without having to recruit for them,
For sure. And, Startup Nation, I think one of the big things that I take away from what Louisa just said is when you talked about, like when you were talking about the difference of products, like if I need something that's for women, but if there's only like a man making that type of product, like that can be, there's a disconnect, right? And so I think that's important, not just the diversity from a demographic standpoint, but those demographics bring diversity of thought and different ways to tackle certain issues. So I'm really glad you brought that up. I think that's a key thing in entrepreneurship for sure. So besides creating jobs, what other benefits do new businesses bring communities, you think?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I think that there are tons of different benefits, and one of them that I can think of right now, it's just like increased culture. I don't know if that's like a good way to say it, but I get what you mean though. More culture, more it makes places a more fun place to live.
Right.
And when you have the presence of businesses, not only are they bringing jobs to the area, but the person who owns that business is now, I'm gonna look for a house here, and then they're going to buy a house and they're paying taxes, so now they're helping to contribute to the economy in that way. And then now their business is here. Now other people want to move to that area, and so they're spending their money in that area.
Absolutely.
So now they're paying property taxes. They're buying things. They're helping to bolster the economy. And obviously jobs is a great indicator of that, but there are those other ones as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, because that's a big one, because a lot of times people don't see that, I guess, auxiliary impact outside of creating jobs, which creating jobs is an important one, but that, increasing that tax base, like you said, and stuff like that, that's a super important one. Thank you for sharing that. What more can city governments, or county governments for that matter, do to kind of help support new and existing entrepreneurs?
Well, I don't know if I have I don't know if I've opined on this enough, but I will say that there's a really cool initiative that I know of that the city of Memphis is participating in, and it's called the 800 Initiative. Right. And the 800 Initiative is essentially, it was announced a couple months back, and it's essentially this, an initiative to help bolster specifically like the African American business community. So there are roughly 39,000 businesses that are owned and operated by African American or Black people, but only about 800 of them have an outside employee, or they've hired somebody
Right.
aside from the people who own it. So the city of Memphis, in partnership with Epicenter and StartCo and Christian Brothers University and some other players in the space, are putting resources and collecting data and creating programs to support those companies, so there can be more companies in the 800, and also the ones that already exist in that space can increase their revenue significantly. So that's an example of one thing that the city government is doing that I think is pretty cool.
So last question before we go to break. Outside of attaining capital, and that's a big one, right? Like we discussed earlier. What are some of the biggest hurdles and challenges that entrepreneurs face? You know, whether like just starting or existing, like kind of what we talked about off air, whatever the case may be. What are some of those other challenges you've seen as you do your work in Epicenter?
Mm-hmm. I think that one of the biggest challenges that I've noticed, aside from getting investment or capital, is customers. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of the two big. These are even like kind of large initiatives that we have at Epicenter, is to help companies with capital, but also with customers. So
the two C's, huh?
Yeah, the only way that your business is going to grow and push forward is either you have an infusion of cash from an investor, or like take out a loan. Mm-hmm. That's one way. The other way is to put more customers on your roster,
right?
Or more clients on your roster. So I think that can be a big challenge for entrepreneurs, and if addressed effectively, can be a very good way to move your business forward.
So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. How you like being back on the Startup Life, Louisa?
It's great. I feel like home.
Awesome. All right, Startup Nation, I hope you're getting great value from Louisa's content, but we got to pay some bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson, and you're listening to The Startup Life. If you are a teacher looking for great resources, look no further than our Teaching with Al section of our website. Enjoy great lessons such as our mini lesson for the story of an hour, or dive into the Nixon presidency as part of our legacy series. Enjoy great peace of mind from our units as they are Common Core aligned. Click the link in the show notes to purchase. All right, Startup Nation, so let's continue. So, Miss Louisa, you know, Startup Nation know that we had like a summer institute, this and the other, and you were so gracious to grace us with your presence and speak about a few things. And so with that in mind, you know, when you spoke to our teachers about preparing our students for a 21st century economy, share some of the things you said as it relates to kids being that, you know, these generation of kids being that next generation of great entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Oh, let me see. What did I say? I believe that I said a lot of things, but I think probably the thing that stands out most to me, and that I'll tell anybody when we're talking about educating students about entrepreneurship, or just even, you know, preparing them for the future world of work, is that right now that I believe that we kind of are on this precipice of a new epoch of you know, how we live, right? So there used to be like the agrarian society, and then the industrial society, and then we moved to like the computer age, where we're all sitting at computers doing our work, and we're moving into something different, and who knows exactly what that will be like. It's kind of like the world of automation. And how will the people of today be able to successfully function in that new space,
Right.
There are a lot of questions, right? So I think that the best way to prepare young minds to exist as entrepreneurs or just, productive members of society, successful members of society, is to teach them how to think. And so it's not necessarily teaching them lots of bits of information to remember and regurgitate on a test.
Right.
It's more of teaching a critical thinking mindset. It's teaching a mindset of growth, that if you can't figure something out, don't worry about it. You'll be able to figure out. You just need to know what the right tools are, right? And that's a lot of times how I approach the work that I do and my life. Like my team might come to me and be like, hey, Louisa, we really need to figure out how to calculate such and such and such to be able to articulate our impact on the economy through these 3 different channels. And like, when they come to me and ask me that, my answer is, I don't know how to do that.
Gotcha.
I don't know. However, I know that I have the tools necessary to figure it out and do a bang up job. So I think that a lot of times, and what I've seen here in Memphis specifically, is a lot of, I'll be like, okay, well, all you have to do is this. And they'll be like, I can't, I don't know how to do that.
Right.
And I'm like, no one knows how to do it. But what I need you to do is figure out how to do it.
Right.
Figure out how to get it done.
Right.
And when you empower young people to have that shift in how they think, then they'll be successful at whatever they do.
Right. It's a lot like what my wife talks about as far as like what she calls MacGyverism. It's like if you have like a door lock and that it requires a key, you don't necessarily need a key. You need a metal device with grooves in it in order to
figure that out,
right? So, and that's the thing, right? I see a lot of times, especially in education or in other places, a lot of times the teacher or the coach is coaching them for what they need that kid to be at that present moment, but it doesn't necessarily set them up for success later down the road. I call it the entrepreneurial mindset, like the ability to figure out, think analytically, think critically to solve problems.
Right.
And
like,
so,
Google is only 20 years old, right? So if you were in school 25 years from, in the past,
right,
and they were trying to teach you about marketing or teaching you about, like, none of that is applicable at all anymore.
Right.
It's completely blown out of the water. So we, like, as we sit here right now, 10 years from now, it's going to be something completely different that changes everything about how we do, right? Like Uber and all these things, these new technologies. So there are going to be jobs that exist in the future that have not even been cooked up now.
Right.
There are going to be business opportunities in the future that, complement some piece of technology that hasn't even been cooked up yet, right? Like people now have businesses dedicated to Facebook marketing and Google ads,
right?
But like, they wouldn't even be able to have had that business 15 years ago,
That's very true.
So we got to teach the young people how to think so that they can take that with them wherever they go.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And, and once again, thank you for speaking at our Summer Institute. It was very valuable information. Can we have too many entrepreneurs? Why or why not?
I think that's a really good question. And I will say that I do not have an answer for you, but I have an opinion.
Okay.
I have some thoughts about the question. I think initially I would kind of say no, in that a person who is an entrepreneur does not necessarily need to be owning their own business. Right. I consider myself an entrepreneur because I do many, many different things. I'm cultivating multiple streams of income. I am investing, right? But I don't own a business per se. I charge people for my thoughts and my time. When I sit down with them and they ask me for their recommendations, I attach a check to it.
Right.
But I
send that invoice.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily I don't necessarily want to build an empire or an infrastructure or an operation.
Gotcha.
And I very much enjoy the work that I do. And I want to continue doing that, even while I invest in real estate or I invest in stocks. But all of that stuff is creating income. So I will say that one does not need to own a company necessarily or hire people to be considered an entrepreneur. And one could be working at a large corporation like FedEx or AutoZone or ServiceMaster and still be an entrepreneurial thinker and have that mindset that we talked about.
Right.
And so I will say that the word entrepreneur can be construed in many different ways. Now, where I say maybe yes, there can be too many entrepreneurs is when I feel like there's this influx of people who want to be talking about their entrepreneurs, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, y'all ain't doing anything. I saw this meme the other day. I have to pull it up while I'm talking.
For sure.
But I think that to be a true entrepreneur, i.e. owning your own business, it's not necessarily such a glamorous thing that people make it out to be.
That's true.
You
That's
know,
very
and you
true.
know this.
Oh my goodness, yes.
So the quote
stories
is,
I can tell.
The quote is, "Never before has a generation so diligently recorded themselves accomplishing so little." And that's kind of how I feel about a lot of people who say they're grinding, they hustling, and they doing all. I'm just like, but what are you doing?
Right.
Like, you're spending more of your time posting to Instagram why you're awesome than generating a revenue.
Right. It's the rocking chair mentality. Like, you're moving, but you ain't going nowhere, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Like you said, you're spending most of the time promoting the thing that you're not doing.
Yes.
For sure.
So that's definitely a thing that I see.
And thank you for sharing that answer. It actually speaks to an episode we did on the Startup Life months ago about, who said anything about starting a business. Like you said, the entrepreneurial mindset is required when you invest in the market, when you buy a house, or budgeting for the month, right? So I'm glad you said that. You're always promoting the show within the show. You did that last episode.
Inception.
Right. I appreciate that. But with that being said, and you talked about building the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and that's what you consider yourself, an entrepreneurial ecosystem builder. What does that mean to you?
Well, the term entrepreneurial ecosystem builder is kind of this new little buzzword that is floating around. There have been some new conferences that I've gone to, and they've kind of like been pushing this word out, this term.
Right.
But essentially, it's a person who supports bolstering their companies, small businesses, entrepreneurs. A lot of times, these people, including myself, are very interested in like tech. They're interested in helping to bring talent to their ecosystem or their city in order to help the city grow, right? So it's so like an ecosystem. If you think about an ecosystem, you think about a jungle.
Right.
There's the leaves and the trees. There's the rain. There's the animals that eat each other or eat the plants. They fertilize the ground, and it's a big circle of life. And when a part of the ecosystem is not healthy, then the whole jungle will begin to suffer. And so people like me who consider themselves entrepreneurial ecosystem builders are taking stock of the ecosystem, the community, as it relates to entrepreneurship, and trying to understand what are the areas that aren't healthy, what are the areas that we could infuse more resources into in order to help the entire city or the entire community flourish.
Because sometimes it's not necessarily that piece is unhealthy. That piece might not even be there.
Yeah, it might not even exist.
Right, for sure. No, I appreciate you sharing that. Was there something else you want to say? I know I kind of cut you off. I'm sorry.
No. We're flourishing out here.
Gotcha. Fair enough. So, let me ask you this. Should entrepreneurs include some type of philanthropy as part of their business model? Like, is that important, or is it all about cash and checks?
All about our money. That's a good question. I think that it really depends on what the company is trying to do, right? So perhaps they could incorporate philanthropy or corporate social responsibility into their giving,
right,
or the things they support. Perhaps their business model and the social impact is baked straight into what they do, right?
Right.
So I think, this is my personal opinion, that every company, every business, every entrepreneur should be mindful about the way that their business impacts the community, the people that are around or the people that they serve. They should be mindful of their effects on other people.
Absolutely.
The environment and all of those things. So whether they cut a check in order to support that, or whether they bake it into the very business itself, my personal opinion is it doesn't necessarily matter. But I do think that, especially as we move forward in the world today, that it's very important. I think that in the past, businesses have not been so intentional about that, and it's had some not so great impacts on people in other countries. It's had not so great impacts on the earth that we live on, and it's if we don't have a planet to live on, if we don't have clean air or trees to give us oxygen, then it doesn't matter how much money we're making, because we're all dead. So so I do think that that's kind of my perspective on it, is that it's going to be crucial in the future. And I think that we see now a bent toward even investors wanting to understand what's your social impact, what is your corporate responsibility structure, what are the things that you're doing to make the world a better place. When a company has a good answer to that question, and obviously a good business model,
for sure,
then it can be a leg up in investing and gaining customers. People care about that kind of stuff.
For sure. And it's important that you mention that whole good business model piece, because a lot of times people are so focused on the philanthropy piece that they don't run the business right. But if you don't run the business right, you can't do the philanthropy piece.
Exactly.
Right? So no,
you can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. It's something that I tell people all the time.
Gotcha.
Whether it's from a business or entrepreneurial standpoint or a personal standpoint, it's just you have to be about your coins. You got to be about your paper. And until you work on creating a sustainable revenue model,
right,
it doesn't really matter. The good that you do is great, but you could just do that yourself.
Right.
you know?
For sure. Can't set yourself on fire to keep people warm. Remember that. Take that to the heart, Startup Nation, for sure. So, as an ecosystem builder, if you will, what advice do you give to friends and family when they have somebody who's starting a business? Because, a lot of times people say, oh, that's great, you're starting a business. Some people are like, you're starting a business, huh? Okay. So what advice do you have for friends and family, for people who are, starting businesses and stuff like that?
Yeah, I would say my first thing, very, very first thing is to understand your customer. And so I have some family and friends who come to me and they're like, oh, I'm going to do this, and I'm like, are you in love with this idea because it sounds really good to you? Or are you in love with this idea because it's sounding good to other people? You can't, if you have a cool concept for, if you have a cool concept for something, but you don't have a market for it, then it's going to be a waste of time. And so I would be like, they'll be like, come sit on my board, come advise me. And I'm like, go do 100 interviews with people and see how much they would pay for this, what's their interest in it, how would they consume it, find if there are any kinks in your idea, your concept, figure out if there's anything that you could add or take away, pitch the idea to some people, and then come back to me, and then I can be excited about it. But I sit in this space all the time of new ideas popping up. Your idea is not original, it's not special, right? That's what I'll tell people. This idea has already been tried to be executed before. I almost can guarantee it, right? In some form or fashion. Now, maybe it's not been executed the way that you would do it,
right? And
therefore you could have a successful business. But like, I just don't get excited about things for people until I think, that's actually viable. Then I'm like, oh man, like, yes, you could do this and this and this. Mm-hmm. But just because I see this so often, it's just like, don't get super excited until you have something to get excited for.
Right. No, I know exactly what you mean, because there's a few friends of mine who say, like, they talk to me for years and years about like this business idea, whatever the case may be. And I was like, maybe I want to bring them on the Startup Life to talk about that or whatever, right? But I was like, nah, I need to see something first. I need to see what type of move. Like, I got a friend who he was talking about an app or whatever, right? He had been talking about it for a while. But then he actually made the investment, got it built, got the concept. He started pitching, like, okay, now he's ready.
Yeah.
Now he's legit. Now I get excited. So I know exactly what you're talking about, because like, you want to be invested for them, you want them to be successful, but it's one of those things where it's like, I can't be more excited than you are.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's a problem. So I'm glad you shared that. Before we get into the last question, I've said this to you before, but I want to get it on record in the stratosphere, right? For sure. Thank you for being here in Memphis as a native. The work that you do here at Epicenter and around the city is super important. I love when people see the treasure that is this city, because a lot of times we have people who are born here and they don't really see the gem that is here. And so Cincinnati, right? Cincinnati?
Yeah, I came from Cincinnati. I lived there for like 6 or 7 years.
Gotcha.
And before that, I lived in Dallas.
Dallas, that's right. Okay, but I just wanted to make sure I put it on wax that I am grateful that you're here. You're coming down here, crushing it, and we as a city are very grateful for you and your talents and what you do for our city. Thank you so much. I wanted to have that on wax. For sure.
Appreciate it.
Last question. Any lasting advice as people start their entrepreneurial journey, trying to stick to their entrepreneurial journey? What advice would you give them?
I would just say, if you believe in what you're doing, stick with it. Be open to changing your idea. Be open to pivoting based on that customer discovery that we talked about, based on what the research that you do. Just be open to that. And have that growth mindset, because there's like the story that I remember hearing, and I don't know if I'll recount it exactly right, but there are like these two scientists, right, and one was an American, one was a British one, and they're working on trying to figure out some sort of thing with, like, I don't remember exactly what they were working on, but both of them ended up having the same result, is that they had like this weird bacteria and they like didn't know what to do with it. And the American scientist was like, this is a true story. The American scientist was just like, oh, I failed. Like, I didn't get the result that I was looking for. And the British scientist was like, like what could we do with this? And it turned out to be penicillin, right? So that particular person wasn't fazed by the fact that what they were trying to accomplish didn't end up exactly the way that they wanted.
Gotcha.
But when they got the result, they tried to see what else they could do with it, and that's really what a true entrepreneur does.
For sure. So that's going to wrap up this episode of the Startup Life, which is probably great because we got the vacuum cleaner in the background here. Did you enjoy being back on the show?
Oh, for sure. It was great.
Would you be willing to come back?
Oh, I mean, third time's a charm.
All right, Startup Nation. So here's my final take. On your path to entrepreneurship, you're going to have many people that are going to be able to help you. People like Louisa at Epicenter is a classic example. They understand that entrepreneurship can be daunting and can be not always an easy road, but when you have partners like Louisa and Epicenter who help build ecosystems for entrepreneurs to be successful, you can go a really long way. If you want to let us know what you think about the show, have an idea for a show topic, or would like to advertise on our show, send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a new way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is here in the show notes. Subscribe to the show, as it can now be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and SoundCloud. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life, the Startup Life.